think that area looks like a possible use that right there.
What do you mean, that bunch of rocks there?
Yeah, that's the spot. See that rock? That flat rock there, just on the lower left-hand side.
Let's do it. Follow me.
Got it. Out you go.
Helicopters are really tremendous things that can get you into all sorts of places. Right here, I'm on the east coast of Cape York Peninsula. And what I intend to do is take a bit of a wander up this coastline because, in my opinion, it's one of the most interesting coastlines you can find in Australia. Cape York Peninsula is still a pretty isolated region with some large areas of undisturbed country. The east coast in particular is no place for a vehicle, so I'm about to head north on foot, following the coastline as much as I can. When I get to the Jardine River, I'm going to veer off to the west, and that'll take me right over to the Gulf Coast of the peninsula. You know, when you're walking around the beaches here, around this coastline, it's a good idea to keep your eye out on the vegetation that you can find. See that stuff over there? Come and have a look at it. That's part of your coastal hibiscus. Always get them around this beachfront area like this. Aboriginal people had lots and lots of different uses for these things. They used to use the wood here, dry it out and make fire sticks out of them. But it's these flowers that I find fascinating. Just have a look inside there. Great big purple throat on them. You can pull these things off. They do them like that, they're terrific. One time I did that and there was a bee inside. It was pretty exciting. Good stuff though. I guess anyone could be forgiven for thinking that these things here were eucalypt trees, but they're not. They're a thing called syzygium, and there's several different species. But around this area here, just a few hundred square yards, there's about 40 or 50 of these things. One of the reasons that's put up as to why there's such a concentration of them just here is the fact that Aboriginal people used to come here year after year to eat the fruit. You can see here that the flowers are just about gone and the fruit's just starting to pop out. They're pretty good fruit. They're called lady apple or bush apple or native apple, and that's why the Aboriginal people came to eat them, because they were good. Having scattered the seeds around the place, they regenerated, and that's why you got such a concentration of them around this area. I don't know, I guess in a couple of weeks, maybe 2 or 3, there'll be fruit everywhere on this thing. As far as bush tuck is concerned, a week or two can make a whole bunch of difference between an empty tree and a decent feed. That's why it's good to keep on the move, to see what's in season further up along the coast. There aren't many roads around the top end of Cape York, so I've left the motor car up the way a bit. Anyway, if you can take the time to walk around the country, you can find all sorts of things. There's so much rubbish washed up on this coastline here. It's absolutely amazing. All these thongs, thousands of them. Makes you wonder where it all came from in the first place. Obviously there was a thong factory here once upon a time. This tells a bit of a tale. This whole area here is a bit of a water catchment. I think it's being fed from a little rocky creek that's coming down under this root system here. Very fine trickle of water coming through here, feeding the water table here. I think if I went up there, we might be able to get some water. We'll have a look anyway. It's got a tiny little trickle of water. Follow it up here a bit further. There's a real little oasis in here. You quite often get these sort of little rock pools along this east coast here of Cape York, but over the other side, totally different story. Pretty dry over there. Take advantage of this sort of thing while you can. Nice water too. Terrific time of the morning this. On the east coast, coral sea out there, sun coming up. Really great. At the moment the tide's right out. It's on the turn, going to come back in again, but while it is out, what I intend to do is walk over there, cut a few miles off the walk. Should be worthwhile. Tells a bit of a tale. Obviously somebody's tried to drive across those flats over there that I've just walked across. Got bogged halfway. Crikey. Can you imagine what was going through the driver's mind when this happened? Tide was out, bogged down to the axles, nothing to winch on, nothing at all. And the tide turns around and comes back in. What a feeling. Mind you, you get a decent feed off the thing. There's blacklip oysters all over it. One of the things you can see at work everywhere on this coastline is the wind. Here at Shelburne Bay, these dunes of pure white sand have been piled up by the southeasterlies. Some of them are over 100 metres high and they're still being pushed forward at a pretty fair rate, way back into the bush. A couple of 100 years ago, you wouldn't have been able to find these coconuts growing along this coastline here simply because as soon as they were washed up, Aboriginal people used to grab them and eat them long before they could germinate. Well, all that's changed, and these days you find coconut palms all the way up and down the place. I guess there's something different though when you're looking at something that's been introduced into Australia naturally, the way these things have, and something that's been introduced by man. And there's an example over here of exactly what I'm talking about. When Mrs. Cook's little boy James busted his boat out here on the Barrier Reef, he put in at the Endeavour River to fix it up. While he was there, he let a whole bunch of pigs loose. ran wild all over the place. They've done a lot of damage. Just have a look up here. These seed pod things there. That's one of Australia's native yams, that thing up there. And down in that hole down there, the pigs have dug out the yam and eaten it. Now, it's pointless to actually dig there for that yam because, as you can see all through here, the pigs have dug it out. All through over there, more further down that way, all the yams around this area, gone, finished. Because of the pigs that Mrs. Cook's little boy dropped here. They're all over the country these days and they do damage everywhere. They're a real pest. That's another one of those lady apple trees. It's finished all the flowering and I can just see a couple of fruit coming on there. A little bit young at this stage. A bit sour, I think, to eat at the moment, but give it another week or two and they'll be in full swing, those things. They're a terrific feed. It's not a bush tucker. It's not even a bush medicine. In fact, it's the remains of what you might call a bush toy. Let's see if I can find the real thing for you later on. Show you what it's about. Fascinating things. Well, there's absolutely no way in the world I'm going to get in that water and swim across that river there because in this part of the world there's far too many crocodiles. What I'm going to have to do is go around the headwaters here and cut inland to get there. Bit of a walk, but that's all right. Actually, there's something in there that's really worth having a look at too. You find it's the mangroves that dominate these rivers, and in turn they attract all sorts of marine life. Birds like this jabiru hang around the place for an easy feed. What I'm after in particular is a mangrove that's a bit out of the ordinary. That's what I've been looking for. That's that bush toy I was telling you about. I'll check that out later on. There's some magnificent bits of rainforest around this coast. And looking at it, it wouldn't be hard to kid yourself that you're in New Guinea. Only problem is, it can be pretty tricky country to navigate in. I'm heading for a place out on the edge of this patch of scrub. Years ago, it was the site of a very strange army experiment. This is the spot. This is where it happened. What the army wanted to do was look at the effect of an atomic explosion in the rainforest. Fortunately, they decided to use ordinary explosives instead of the real thing. They built a great big tower, loaded it up with TNT and pushed the button.
Minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
All this happened way back in the early 60s, and you can see as you look around here that the whole of the country around here has turned into one big cow paddock because of the effect of the blowdown. Well, I guess this is what you'd call environmental impact. I don't think it'd happen too much these days. Starting to fall to bits. That's that thing I picked up in the mangroves there way back. That's the bush toy I was talking about. I'll show you what it's all about. These things here, some people call them cannonball mangrove, and the reason for that's pretty obvious. They look a bit like a cannonball, but myself, I prefer the other name, puzzle fruit. And it gets that name because of all these segments inside here. Just be very careful there. People up in the Torres Strait, well, they get these things and give them to their kids to put back together, just like a jigsaw puzzle. Just get it out very, very carefully, will you? There they are, all those segments. And it was one of those segments that I picked up on the beach. I don't know, I'll just let it loose down here. Of course, the trick is, once you've broken it open, to put it back together. It'll probably take me a month of Sundays to do it. Ah, look at that. Some of the plants around this part of the world, because the soil is so poor with nutrients, they've got to get up to some really fancy tricks to survive, and this is one of them. It's a thing called a pitcher plant. And it's got that name because it looks a bit like a water pitcher, sideways there. That is the extension of the leaf. And it only grows that pitcher when it's really, really hard up. Because what happens is that the ants crawl down because there's a very sweet smelling liquid right down here. And once they're down the bottom, the plants digest the ants. Sounds like I've got to go. Could have done with a few more days down at that waterfall still. It's good to get a lift a bit further north. The country up ahead would take a long time to slog through on foot. Anyway, I need to make up a bit of time. I'm going to be dropped at the Jardine River. Travelling down the Jardine is a good way of getting to the west coast. It rises way over to the east and cuts right across the peninsula. That's the last of the helicopter lifts. I've been lucky enough to get a couple of them over the last few weeks. He's off on another job though. I've got to find myself some other way of getting around the place. Times like this, a blow-up mattress can be a pretty handy piece of gear. Luckily, there aren't any crocodiles this far up the Jardine. Still, need to keep a bit of a lookout though. I've left something in the bush that I definitely need to track down. That's what I wanted to see. Something up in here I better pick up. Is this a sight for sore eyes? It's a hot, dry stretch of country over to the west coast, and even though the roads aren't the best, it's still pretty good to be back in the car again. It would have been tempting to stay a bit longer at the river, but there's still a couple of things I'm after. I haven't sorted out that puzzle fruit yet either. Well, this is the western side of Cape York Peninsula. This is the Gulf of Carpentaria out here, and this beach here is so typical of what you find around this part of the world. Long, straight lines of beach and flat ocean like this that goes for miles and miles. But it's worth having a look at. Up the top of Cape York here, it's just a short hop to the Torres Strait Islands and then New Guinea. Aboriginal people living around this coastline would have had quite a bit to do with the people to the north. And along the beaches, even today, you can often find reminders of that contact. See this log here? This one here. These things are scattered up and down this coastline for miles and miles, and you'll notice that at the ends of the log it's been cut off by a chainsaw. Well, it didn't get here by accident. Well, I suppose it did, but originally it started off as a bit of timber up in New Guinea, because up there they cut that timber and let it float downstream. The logs float downstream where they're caught and then milled. Well, they don't always catch them, so that, particularly during the wet season, they end up here in the Gulf and get washed ashore here. You find these things all over the place. Oh, look at this. Now that is definitely down from New Guinea. It's been washed down here probably during the wet season, cast up on the beach. You know, years ago, around this Carpentaria coastline here, there was a legend about this bloke who had this dugout canoe a bit like this, and he'd paddle down from over the horizon to the north there, and he'd raid all the camps around the place. He'd get all the young women, put them in his canoe, then disappear north back over the horizon. Well, they were never seen again. And his name was the Shivery Man. Well, there you go. This is what I've been waiting for, lady apples. There's a whole mob of them all over this tree. And I reckon these things here have got to be one of the best bush tuckers you can get. They've got a very tarty, sort of slightly soury type taste to them, but I reckon they're terrific. Right now, all the way around the Cape, these lady apple trees be punching out fruit all over the place, even those ones way back on the east coast. Might take a whole bunch back to camp, I think. This is really quite typical of the bush tucker scene. As the lady apples are coming in, those monkey nuts up there, and there's only one of them left, it's just waiting up there ready to drop. They're just about had it. So as one thing comes in, the other one goes out. I've had a few goes at trying to solve this puzzle, Fred. It's certainly a bit of a challenge. Still, I think I've just about got it beat.